He left the vicarage with a quiet excuse, and by morning James Lacey had vanished without a trace. This is James Lacey, and the night he disappeared without a word. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Your comments make this cozy corner feel even warmer, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next mystery. Agatha Raisin's evening began with a thud, which she considered deeply unfair. She had rehearsed her entrance to Mrs. Blocksby's modest dinner party all afternoon, practicing a breezy smile and a studied air of indifference for James Lacey's benefit. Instead, the universe chose humiliation. As she swept through the vicarage doorway in a fitted midnight blue dress that would have stunned anyone with functioning eyesight, her heel landed squarely on a hymn book Doris Simpson had abandoned with criminal negligence. Agatha skidded forward with an undignified squeak, windmilling her arms before colliding with the edge of the dining table. The trifle at its centre trembled heroically, then collapsed sideways with a wet plop. A silence, indulgent and dreadful, washed over the room. "Oh dear," murmured Mrs. Blocksby, hurrying over with a napkin already apologetic. Doris tutted. Those shoes were never suitable for a church floor. Agatha pushed herself upright, furious at both gravity and Doris. "I'm perfectly fine," she snapped, though her dignity had fractured neatly into 3 pieces. She brushed trifle off her sleeve with quick, savage flicks. James Lacey stepped forward with maddening calm. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly, offering his hand. He looked irritatingly handsome, rested, and oblivious to the emotional carnage he inspired. "Not at all," Agatha said, grabbing his hand and pulling herself up before anyone could pity her further, just performing a small acrobatic demonstration. A few guests gave polite laughter, the kind that stung more than silence. Mrs. Blocksby insisted Agatha sit by the fire while she fetched a cloth, and James hovered in that polite, distant way he reserved for any situation involving Agatha and public embarrassment. The dinner resumed with tentative chatter. Mrs. Blocksby's dining room was warm, candles flickering in glass holders, the scent of baked ham drifting comfortingly through the space. Agatha tried to settle, but every time she glanced up, someone's expression hovered between sympathy and amusement. Even Hodge, curled smugly on her lap after leaping up uninvited, seemed to regard her with feline superiority. James made conversation with a visiting curate about naval history, his tone brisk and faintly humourless. Agatha pretended not to listen, though she caught every word. She had looked forward to this evening ever since hearing he had returned from some vague research trip, which in Agatha's mind meant he had been jaunting about Europe, avoiding emotional responsibility. She had planned an elegant reintroduction. Instead, she had performed an involuntary floor display. Midway through the meal, a soft knock sounded at the vicarage door. Mrs. Blocksby rose to answer it, and returned holding a small folded note. "For you, Mr. Lacey," she said, handing it to James with an apologetic smile. Agatha watched with narrowed eyes as he unfolded it, read it once, then tucked it discreetly into his jacket pocket. Everything about the gesture annoyed her. "Secret admirer," she said lightly, though her tone carried enough acid to strip paint. James offered a stiff smile. "Nothing of the sort." Moments later he pushed back his chair. "Forgive me, everyone. I need to fetch something from home. I'll return shortly." Mrs. Blocksby nodded. "Of course. We'll keep your pudding warm." Agatha lifted her chin. "We'll try to manage without you." James left, closing the door with infuriating gentle politeness. The table resumed its conversations, though now half the village eyes flickered toward Agatha, waiting for her reaction like cats around a dropped sausage. She refused to give them the satisfaction, but as the meal progressed, James failed to return. Mrs. Blocksby checked her watch twice. Doris made a remark about men wandering off whenever chores approach. Agatha felt her worry rise in sharp increments. She masked it with dry commentary, but her gaze kept drifting to James's empty chair. By dessert, gossip had entered the bloodstream of the evening. "I heard," whispered Mrs. Timms to Doris, "that he was seen on the green this afternoon with a woman in a red scarf. Very striking, apparently." Agatha stabbed her pudding. Nonsense. If James ever met a striking woman, the village would erect a plaque. The table chuckled. Beneath it, Agatha felt jealousy coil with unpleasant energy. A woman in a red scarf. Typical. The sort of rustic melodrama the Cotswolds excelled at producing. Mrs. Blocksby attempted to quell the speculation with gentle firmness, but the rumour took on a life of its own. Someone mentioned raised voices near the war memorial. Someone else insisted they'd heard James promising to sort it out tonight. Each detail became more dramatic with every whisper. Agatha sat rigid, pretending not to care. "People invent things when they're bored," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "James isn't the type to vanish in the middle of a pudding." But he had vanished, and not even in an interesting way. After the plates were cleared, the guests began to depart, each casting a subtle glance at Agatha as if hoping to catch her mid-collapse. She maintained a firm expression of blasé confidence, which fooled exactly no one. Outside the vicarage door, she stopped and reached automatically for her handbag. "Just one cigarette," she muttered to herself, as an act of spiritual restoration. She stepped aside from the departing guests and lit up, careful not to drop ash on Mrs. Blocksby's neat gravel path. The night was quiet, the kind of stillness that suggested the village was holding its breath, waiting for someone else to make a fool of themselves. Her gaze drifted across the lane toward James's cottage. It stood in darkness, no welcoming glow from the lamps, no movement at the curtains. She frowned. "He must have popped back and gone straight to bed," she said aloud, but the explanation rang hollow. James was habitually punctual. If he excused himself for 5 minutes, he returned in 4. Hodge brushed against her leg, demanding attention in the least helpful way. "Don't start," she said, lifting him briefly before setting him down again. She sniffed the air, feeling something tighten in her chest. Not fear exactly, but the restless agitation that swept her whenever the world refused to make sense. The cottage remained still. Too still. Agatha flicked her cigarette into a flower pot with the air of someone taking decisive action. "If he thinks he can wander off without a word and leave me to face the village gossips alone," she muttered, "he's got another thing coming." But the unease lingered, whispering at the edge of her thoughts, and James's cottage stayed silent, dark, and oddly untouched, as if no one had crossed its threshold since he walked out of the vicarage door. Agatha wrapped her coat tighter, her annoyance sharpening into something colder, more focused. Something wasn't right, and Agatha Raisin, battered pride and all, intended to find out exactly why, even if the entire WI watched her trip over another hymn book in the process. Hodge trotted ahead toward home, glancing back at her with a reproachful blink. Agatha followed, her steps quickening, her mind already forming suspicions she refused to say aloud. The night closed around Carsley in quiet, nosy stillness, and somewhere in the dark, James Lacey had disappeared without a word. "Honestly, Hodge, stop glaring. I'm not flinging you into danger. I'm merely checking on a neighbour," Agatha said, stepping out of her cottage with the purposeful stride of someone determined to appear calm while feeling anything but. Hodge trotted behind, tail flicking with disapproval, as if he'd already decided she was up to nonsense. She marched straight toward James Lacey's cottage, rehearsing excuses in her mind. She would knock casually, perhaps mention borrowing a book, then subtly check if he'd survived his mysterious errand. Nothing dramatic, nothing revealing, nothing the villagers could twist into gossip. Unfortunately, the villagers were already awake. Mrs. Timms was pruning an entirely innocent hedge. Mr. Cartwright stood at his gate, pretending to adjust a hanging basket. Doris Simpson swept her front step with the solemnity of a ceremonial guard. All three paused to watch Agatha advance. "Oh, morning," Doris called. "Off to check on dear Mr. Lacey." "I'm simply being neighbourly," Agatha said, forcing breezy confidence. "One must ensure he hasn't locked himself out again." "He's not one for forgetfulness," Mr. Cartwright observed, leaning forward like a man sniffing scandal. Agatha refused to give him any. She marched up to James's door and knocked firmly. Silence. She knocked again. Silence pressed back like a smug butler. She peered through the sitting-room window. The curtains hung untouched, no movement, no light. She muttered. "Probably out for a brisk walk. He's very keen on those." Doris coughed pointedly. "At this hour?" "Yes, Doris," Agatha snapped. "Some people enjoy mornings." To her irritation, Hodge sat at the doorstep and stared at the wood with focused intensity. Agatha knelt and tried the handle. Locked. She straightened and peered through the narrower pane beside the door. Inside, she saw James's coat on its peg and his boots neatly beside the radiator, precisely where he'd left them the previous evening. Not helpful, not reassuring. Mrs. Blocksby appeared at the lane's end, carrying a basket of parish leaflets. "Good morning, Agatha," she said warmly. "Are you trying to reach James? He didn't return to the vicarage last night." Agatha stiffened. "I'm aware." "This isn't like him," Mrs. Blocksby said softly. "He seemed distracted at dinner." Distracted, preoccupied, secretive. Agatha felt a flare of irritation on top of her worry. She wasn't about to show either emotion. Before she could reply, a car chugged to a stop beside them. Bill Wong stepped out, tucking a notepad into his jacket. "Morning, all. I've just checked with Moreton in Marsh Station staff. James didn't take any trains last night." A small silence followed, thick with implications. "He must have walked," Agatha said quickly. "Or taken a taxi. He's not vanished." Bill gave her a gentle look. "We're not assuming anything yet." Agatha hated the careful tone police used when they thought something was wrong. Mr. Cartwright, who had edged closer, cleared his throat. "Well, I did hear a car door slam near midnight." "A car door?" Agatha repeated. "Posh engine," he said confidently. No, Doris corrected. "It was an old rust bucket. I heard it too." "You didn't," Mr. Cartwright snapped. "You're deaf in your left ear." Doris lifted her chin. "My right ear works perfectly." Mrs. Blocksby attempted diplomacy. "Let's not argue. It may have been nothing." But the rumour had already sprouted legs. Agatha moved toward the gate, searching for anything resembling evidence. She stopped abruptly. A faint, unfamiliar scent lingered in the air. She leaned closer and sniffed. Cigar smoke. Not James's. He only smoked his occasional pipe when feeling pompous. This was strong, masculine, and irritatingly luxurious. "Bill," Agatha said sharply, "come smell this." Bill dutifully bent down, inhaled, and frowned. "Cigar. Strong one." "Exactly. And James doesn't smoke cigars." Doris peered over Agatha's shoulder. "Perhaps his visitor did." "There was no visitor," Agatha snapped. "The man's probably hiding inside reading naval history." Bill sighed. "Agatha." "Don't use that tone, Bill," she warned. "It makes me feel like the hysterical heroine in a cheap novel." Bill wisely backed off. Agatha stepped back and surveyed the grass. Dew glistened across the lawn, soft, bright, and undisturbed. Not a single footprint, not even Hodges, who seemed offended by wet grass and remained by the gate, cleaning his paw with exaggerated delicacy. "So he didn't leave on foot," she muttered. "Unless he floated," Doris offered helpfully. Agatha exhaled sharply. "He didn't float, Doris. People do not float out of their own gardens." Mrs. Blocksby touched Agatha's arm. "The absence of footprints suggests he entered a vehicle." "Or was taken," Mr. Cartwright whispered dramatically. Agatha spun round. "No one took him. Stop turning this into a village thriller. It's embarrassing." "Only trying to help," Mr. Cartwright huffed. Bill began taking notes, glancing between the hedge and the lane. "If a car was here, it didn't leave tyre marks. The ground's too firm." "See," Agatha said triumphantly. "No car." But even she didn't believe herself. Mrs. Blocksby studied her with gentle sympathy. "Agatha, why don't we walk around the back?" Agatha bristled. "Fine, but only to prove there's nothing to worry about." They moved around the cottage, Bill following. The back garden was as immaculate as James always kept it. The shed remained locked. The patio chair hadn't shifted. The bird feeder was smugly occupied by a single robin. Agatha pointed. If disaster had occurred, that robin would look more concerned. Bill hid a smile. They returned to the front path. A small crowd had gathered. 3 WI ladies, 2 dog walkers, and the vicar's nephew, who had appeared purely for entertainment. Agatha felt her temper rise like steam from a kettle. "Everyone go home," she barked. "This is not a spectacle." "Then why are you shouting?" someone asked. Agatha flushed. "Because I'm projecting authority." Bill stepped closer, speaking softly so only she could hear. "There's more. I phoned the bank after checking the station. James didn't withdraw any money yesterday. Nothing. Not even cash for travel." The words hit her like a cold draft through an open door. "So he didn't plan to go anywhere," she said quietly. "It looks that way." Agatha swallowed. Worry swelled despite her armour of bravado. "Bill, what are you thinking?" "That he left the vicarage intending to return," Bill said, "and something changed his path." She folded her arms tightly. "Or he met someone, or got distracted, or—" "Agatha." She fell silent. Mrs. Blocksby stepped closer, offering a reassuring smile. Let's not leap to conclusions. Perhaps he received news requiring urgent attention. Yes, Agatha said, seizing the explanation like a lifeline. Of course. Urgent naval business. Bill raised a brow. At midnight? Agatha scowled. It's not unheard of. Mr. Cartwright piped up again. It's always a woman in these cases. Saw it in a documentary. Agatha rounded on him. If you suggest one more time that James ran off with a mysterious woman, I'll personally bury your gardening gloves. He stepped back. A hush settled, punctuated only by Hodge scratching delicately at a patch of grass, bored with the investigation. Agatha stared again at the dark cottage window. He wouldn't just disappear, she whispered almost to herself. Not like this. Mrs. Blocksby slipped a comforting hand over hers. We'll find out what happened. Agatha nodded, straightened, and summoned her familiar determination. Right. I'll speak to everyone who saw anything. Maybe let Bill lead, Mrs. Blocksby suggested. I'll assist Bill, Agatha corrected, offering a tight smile. He needs guidance. Bill sighed but accepted his fate. The group slowly dispersed. Agatha lingered, gaze fixed on the untouched doorstep, the faint cigar scent drifting in the air, and the dew-bright lawn that betrayed no trace of James's departure. Something had happened, something subtle, quiet, and troubling. Hodge brushed against her leg, stretching luxuriously before trotting toward home, tail flicking like a metronome of disapproval. Agatha followed, casting one last look over her shoulder at James's silent cottage. Whatever had taken James from that doorstep hadn't left footprints, and that unsettled her more than she was willing to admit. I'm telling you, Mrs. Timms, a red scarf does not make someone a femme fatale, Agatha snapped, marching into the WI hall with the brisk fury of a woman already regretting being awake. The WI meeting was only minutes underway, yet gossip hummed like a badly tuned radio. Women clustered in small groups, whispering, gesturing, and occasionally glancing at Agatha with the faintly patronizing sympathy villagers reserved for anyone whose romantic life had entered the rumour mill. Mrs. Timms folded her arms. A woman in red is always trouble. That's basic storytelling. It's the WI, not a French thriller, Agatha retorted. Mrs. Blocksby stepped between them with her usual serene diplomacy. Ladies, let's keep the tone constructive. We don't know anything yet. We know plenty, Mrs. Timms said triumphantly. A stranger was seen yesterday asking directions to James Lacey's cottage, wearing a red scarf. Very elegant, apparently. Agatha arranged her face into an expression of studied indifference. People wander through Castley all the time. Some even wear colours. Mrs. Blocksby gave her a gentle, knowing look. Agatha, dear, it might help to speak with Mr. Cartwright again. He said the woman had a London accent. Oh, wonderful, Agatha muttered. Now we're profiling accents. The meeting attempted to proceed, but the room kept circling back to the mysterious scarfed visitor. Mrs. Blocksby fought valiantly to steer discussions toward the upcoming charity bake sale, though every second sentence somehow returned to the London woman, or James's secret rendezvous. Agatha tried to focus on the treasurer's report, but fragments of gossip flickered around her like irritating midges. Quite tall, I heard. Asked about the bus schedule. Definitely moneyed. James always did have refined tastes. Agatha slammed her pen onto the table. James has many flaws, but falling for a woman who wanders villages like a tourist brochure isn't one of them. Mrs. Timms smirked. Maybe she wasn't after romance. Agatha narrowed her eyes. What then? Stamp collecting? Before Mrs. Timms could respond, Agatha's handbag burst into a shrill ringtone. She fumbled for her mobile, ignoring the chorus of disapproving looks. The WI adhered to an unwritten rule that phones should remain silent unless summoning paramedics. Agatha, darling, Roy Silver's voice burst forth with the energy of a man who considered decibels an art form. You sound tense. Has the countryside wilted your spirit again? Roy, this isn't a good time. Nonsense. It's always a good time when I bring intrigue. Listen, I've spotted the most marvellous bit of gossip. A London socialite has been posting cryptic classifieds in the Daily Globe. Something about meeting a certain Cotswolds gentleman. Thought of James immediately. Agatha's stomach tightened. Describe her. Oh, draped in expensive nonsense. One photo shows her with a red scarf. Silk, darling, not acrylic like the ones people knit for charity shops. Could be connected. Agatha shot upright, chair screeching. Dozens of eyes swiveled toward her. "I have to go," she said, hanging up before Roy could descend into theatrical speculation. Mrs. Timms pounced. "A red scarf, you say? How convenient." Agatha grabbed her handbag. "Coincidence. And Roy's definition of gentleman includes anyone wearing matching socks." Mrs. Blocksby stepped forward. "Agatha, perhaps we should discuss this calmly." "I am perfectly calm," Agatha said, her voice 3 notes above calm. "I simply refuse to sit," while she swept out of the hall, slamming the door with more force than the hinges deserved. Hodge, who had followed her that morning out of curiosity and a desire for crumbs, popped out from behind a chair and scampered after her. Outside, the lane was bright with soft sunshine, which annoyed her further. Tragedy ought to at least occur under dramatic lighting. She strode toward James's cottage again, muttering blistering observations about gossip, scarves, and men who vanished without proper explanations. As she approached the hedge, something caught her eye, a tiny scrap of red wool tangled on a thorn. She froze, leaned closer, and carefully plucked it free. "Aha," she whispered. "Evidence." Hodge sniffed at it, unimpressed. Agatha held it up triumphantly. It wasn't silk, certainly not socialite material, but it was red, and therefore symbolically powerful, which suited her narrative needs. "Bill will have to take this seriously," she said, tucking it into her pocket with the grandeur of a detective revealing a smoking gun. She marched to the police station, where Bill Wong was organizing a discouragingly ordinary stack of paperwork. He looked up with weary affection. "Agatha, what's happened now?" She placed the wool scrap on his desk. "Found this near James's hedge. Proof a woman in a red scarf was there." Bill examined it. "It's acrylic." "That's not the point. It's red and woolly and clearly torn from something." Bill sighed. "Agatha, wool snags on hedges all the time." "Do hedges arrange themselves to frame crimes?" "No, Bill. This means something." He hesitated, then reached for a file. "There is one thing I didn't mention earlier. James made a strange phone call the day before the dinner." Agatha leaned forward. "Strange how?" "He phoned a public telephone box in Evesham. Only rang once, no one picked up." Agatha blinked. "Who still uses public phones?" "People who don't want their calls traced," Bill said quietly. She felt a cold ripple, not fear exactly, but offended curiosity. "So James was up to something?" "We don't know that." "Oh, please. When a man phones a telephone box, he isn't ordering jam." Bill rubbed his forehead. "Agatha, don't jump to conclusions." "I don't jump. I stride gracefully toward logical deductions." Before Bill could respond, the door opened and Mr. Griggs, a reserved neighbour of James's, stepped inside. He removed his hat with nervous precision. "Inspector Wong, I didn't want to cause fuss, but I heard voices near James's cottage yesterday morning." Bill perked up. "Men or women?" "Sounded like 2 men, Griggs said, arguing. Agatha froze. 2 men, are you sure?" "As sure as an old fellow can be," Griggs replied. One voice wasn't James's, deeper, rough. Agatha stared. But the WI swore it was a woman in a red scarf. Griggs shrugged apologetically. "Didn't hear any woman." Bill scribbled notes. "Thank you. This helps." Griggs nodded and slipped out quietly. Agatha stood motionless, her judgments rearranging themselves like mismatched furniture. So, the WI got it wrong. "They get many things wrong," Bill said gently. She ignored him, mind racing. "If it wasn't a woman, then why is red wool on the hedge?" "Could belong to anyone," Bill offered. Agatha huffed. "Bill, coincidence is the coward's explanation." Her thoughts spun with new irritation. If James had argued with a man, then the glamorous socialite theory collapsed, and she had been theatrically jealous for nothing, a humiliating waste of emotional resources. She lifted her chin. Fine. New theory. Someone confronted James, and whoever it wasn't a dainty woman fluttering a scarf. "Agatha, I'll find out who it was," she said, sweeping toward the door. "This village can't hide its secrets forever. Not from me." Hodge hopped beside her, tail flicking with amused indifference. Bill called after her, "Don't start interrogating half the village." "I'll interrogate whoever needs interrogating," she declared, disappearing into the sunlight with dramatic purpose. Hodge paused, stretched, and trotted after her, perfectly content to witness whatever chaos she created next. "Don't tell me you heard something new," Agatha said sharply, marching up to Mr. Cartwright's gate as if storming a fort. She had not slept well. Worry, indignation, and the idiocy of village gossip had churned through her mind like a broken blender. Mr. Cartwright jumped, nearly dropping the mug he was polishing. "Morning to you too, Mrs. Raisin. Did you or did you not tell someone that James was heard arguing outside his cottage yesterday?" Mr. Cartwright blinked. "I said I thought I heard raised voices." "Which is village code for a full reenactment of Julius Caesar," Agatha muttered. Hodge, sitting at her feet, gave a theatrical yawn. Before Mr. Cartwright could elaborate, Mrs. Timms appeared, arms folded. There was definitely an argument. "My cousin's neighbour's son heard it." Agatha stared at her. "Your cousin's neighbour's son? That's 3 degrees of unreliability." Mrs. Timms sniffed. "Sound carries." "So does nonsense." Mrs. Blocksby arrived with soothing footsteps. "Let's take a calm approach," she said kindly. "Agatha, perhaps speak with people individually, not as a pack," Agatha finished. "Yes, well, packs are exactly the problem." Bill Wong approached from the lane, carrying a notebook already half filled. "I need formal statements," he said, "though none of them match yet." "That's because the WI could misremember their own birthdays," Agatha retorted. Mrs. Blocksby clasped her hands gently. "Why don't we walk to the cottage and look together?" Agatha straightened. "Good idea. I'll lead." She set off with an air of proprietorship that would have alarmed lesser men. Bill followed, resigned. Mrs. Blocksby walked at her usual serene pace, and Mr. Cartwright scurried to keep up, eager to remain relevant. As they neared James's cottage, Agatha took a long, assessing look at the hedge, the path, the closed curtains. The scene felt maddeningly untouched. "Right," she said. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Mr. Cartwright puffed himself up. "I heard James saying, 'You can't expect me to agree to that.'" "That's it," Agatha snapped. "Well," he said defensively, "my hearing isn't what it used to be." Mrs. Timms chimed in. "I heard someone say, 'You're making this difficult.'" Bill frowned. "But you live on the next lane." "Yes, but I had my windows open," she insisted. Agatha turned on her. "Your windows face the opposite direction." Mrs. Timms stiffened. "Sound travels." "Not through brick walls," Agatha muttered. Mrs. Blocksby raised a calming hand. "Agatha, dear." But Agatha was already pacing the garden with investigative fervour. She checked the narrow side path, the gate hinges, the gravel. "Nothing disturbed," she said. "If they argued, they did so politely." Bill stepped closer. "Let's not assume it was James. Maybe the neighbours misheard." Agatha folded her arms. "Misheard? This village can hear a teacup crack from 5 houses away." "Even so," Bill said. "I'd like to speak with everyone separately." Agatha was about to retort when something near the lane caught her eye. Faint marks on the edge of the grass. Not footprints, not tire treads, but something dragged lightly. "Bill," she said sharply. He crouched. Hard to say. Early dew could have blurred impressions. "Could this be from a bicycle?" Agatha asked. "Possibly," Bill said, "but there's no clear track." Mrs. Timms leaned over dramatically. "Looks like signs of a struggle." Agatha closed her eyes. "Everything looks like signs of a struggle to you. A fallen tea towel becomes a hostage situation." Before the debate grew worse, the sound of a car horn blared. Charles Fraith rolled up in his vintage convertible, hair annoyingly perfect. "Well," he said cheerfully, stepping out, "I see the investigation has devolved into horticultural analysis." Agatha glowered. "Where have you been?" "Sleeping. It's a marvellous hobby." Bill gestured toward the grass. "We're trying to determine if someone came or went along this side." Charles crouched, inspecting the faint streak. Could be from a suitcase wheel, or a golf trolley, or from absolutely nothing. Hard to tell." Agatha folded her arms. "Not helpful." Charles smiled lazily. "I came because I have information, darling. James bought an old wartime journal recently, from an estate sale." Agatha blinked. "A journal?" "Yes. Rare, apparently. Could be valuable. Could also contain secrets." Mrs. Blocksby placed a thoughtful hand on her chin. "James didn't say anything about that at the dinner." "He rarely says things," Charles replied. "Very irritating trait." Agatha's mind whirred. If someone wanted the journal, perhaps that caused the argument. Bill nodded slowly. "We'll need to confirm this." Charles dusted his trousers. "You should ask the Carsley Historical Society. They obsess over anything older than last Tuesday." Agatha straightened. "Fine, I'll interrogate them." Mrs. Blocksby gave a worried smile. "Perhaps start gently." Agatha dismissed the advice with a wave and strode toward the village, determination sharpening her step. The Carsley and District Historical Society met in a draughty room above the parish library. Agatha pushed the door open with unnecessary force, causing 3 elderly members to jump and one to drop a biscuit. "Good morning," she said briskly. "I need information." Mrs. Plimpton, chairwoman and village authority on Roman tiles, blinked nervously. "About what, Mrs. Raisin?" "A wartime journal, one James Lacey purchased from an estate sale." A flurry of whispers followed. Mr. Dunkley adjusted his spectacles. "Marcus Dalrymple's estate?" Agatha pounced. "Who was he?" "Local family, old land dispute, complicated history," Mrs. Plimpton said. "Complicated how?" Agatha pressed. "Well," Mr. Dunkley said, "Marcus was accused of misrepresenting land claims after the war. Family still sensitive about it." Agatha's pulse quickened. "And the journal?" "No idea what was in it," Mrs. Plimpton said, "but some believe it held evidence. Never proven." Agatha's eyes gleamed. "Evidence is exactly my area." The room collectively flinched. Mr. Dunkley added nervously, "You should speak with Colin Dalrymple. He's Marcus's nephew, lives near the workshop by the old footpath, but he doesn't like outsiders." "Good," Agatha said. "I'm not an outsider. I'm a menace." She swept out, leaving the society members subdued and grateful. Colin Dalrymple's workshop sat behind a hedgerow of stubborn brambles. Agatha and Charles approached it like explorers nearing a hostile camp. Charles knocked politely. "Mr. Dalrymple, we need a word." A stocky man with guarded eyes opened the door. "What?" Agatha thrust her chin forward. "We're here about the journal you sold." His expression tightened. "Not discussing it." Charles smiled disarmingly. "We only want to know if anyone else was interested in it." "No one," Colin said sharply. "Now go." But Agatha had spotted something behind him, a neat row of cigar tins on a shelf. "Do you smoke cigars?" she asked. "None of your business." Because someone smoking a powerful cigar was near James Lacey's cottage, just before he disappeared. Colin stiffened. "I wasn't anywhere near his cottage." Agatha stepped closer. "Then why do you look guilty?" He bristled. "Because you're barging into my workshop shouting accusations." Charles held up a hand. "Let's stay civil." Colin glared. "Leave," Agatha persisted. "Did you argue with James?" "No," Colin said firmly. "He promised not to stir family trouble, that's it." "Trouble about what?" she demanded. Colin's jaw clenched. "Nothing you need to know." Charles tugged her arm. "We're done here." As Colin slammed the door, Agatha muttered, "He's hiding something." "Of course," Charles said mildly. "Most people hide things. It's what makes them tolerable." Agatha glared but couldn't entirely disagree. They walked back toward the village, Agatha fuming. "That man is guilty of something." "Maybe of bad manners," Charles said, "but hardly kidnapping James." "I didn't say kidnapping," Agatha snapped. "Don't escalate it." Charles smirked. "You escalated it the moment you burst into his workshop." Before she could retort, Mrs. Blocksby met them on the lane, her expression gentle but concerned. "Agatha dear, any progress?" "Only that the Dalrymples have skeletons in every cupboard," Agatha said, "and Colin smokes cigars strong enough to fumigate a cathedral." Mrs. Blocksby gave a soft sigh. "Cigar smoke doesn't prove guilt." "I'll settle for relevance," Agatha muttered. Charles shrugged. "It's still thin." Agatha ignored him. Her thoughts churned, arguments, journals, footprints that vanished on tarmac. And James's empty house. "We're missing a piece," she said quietly. Mrs. Blocksby nodded. "Then keep looking, but don't tire yourself out." Agatha managed a reluctant smile. She appreciated Mrs. Blocksby's warmth even when she resisted it. Hodge, who had been following at a leisurely distance, stretched luxuriously on the path, flicking his tail at a beetle. Agatha bent to scoop him up. "You're no help at all," she said softly, but holding him steadied her. As they walked home, Agatha glanced back toward James's silent cottage. The argument no one heard clearly had become a puzzle everyone remembered differently, and Agatha intended to pry the truth loose, no matter how deep it was buried. Bill, if you drive any slower, we shall arrive next week, Agatha snapped, gripping the passenger door as his small police hatchback trundled along the road toward Evesham. Her nerves had grown sharper overnight, and the knowledge that James's car had been found abandoned tightened every muscle in her shoulders. Bill kept his tone steady. We don't need speed, Agatha. We need accuracy. We also need urgency, she retorted. James didn't stroll off for a picnic. Hodge had been left at home. Agatha insisted cats weren't built for investigative fieldwork, though she privately wished she had something warm and judgmental on her lap. Charles had offered to accompany her, but Agatha refused. She suspected he would simply make sarcastic remarks and use the car bonnet as a sun lounger. Bill pulled onto a quiet lay-by flanked by hedgerows. James's modest green car sat alone, slightly askew, as if abandoned mid-thought. Agatha felt a cold ripple. She stepped out before Bill switched off the engine. "Well?" she demanded. "What do we see?" "Let's take it one step at a time," Bill said gently. Agatha leaned into the open driver door. Everything appeared normal. Keys still in the ignition. Seat adjusted just as James liked it, stiffly upright, like a man determined to maintain posture despite life's nonsense. No sign of a struggle. No scratches. No dents. Then she spotted the envelope. It lay on the passenger seat, torn open, addressed in neat handwriting. James Lacey, Carsley. She picked it up gingerly. The envelope was empty, but a faint floral perfume lingered. Agatha sniffed it sharply. So there was a woman. Bill examined the envelope. Plenty of perfumes smell like this. Could belong to anyone. Anyone female, Agatha insisted, or at least anyone determined to smell expensive. Bill held back a smile. This doesn't prove anything. It proves everything, she argued. James receives a mysterious note, storms off from a dinner party, and here we have an envelope smelling like someone bathed in roses. Bill tapped the paper. We need the content. The missing letter matters, not the envelope. Agatha resisted the urge to stomp her foot. Well, unless the letter wrote itself and fled, someone removed it. Bill circled the car exterior with professional calm. No force, no scuffle. He either stepped out willingly or met someone he trusted. Agatha scanned the ground. "Bill, footprints." He hurried over. There were indeed two sets impressed faintly into the earth, one light and narrow, James's shoes she recognized immediately, the other heavier, deeper, leading away from the car and disappearing on the tarmac like a smudged signature. "See," she said triumphantly. "He wasn't alone." Bill crouched. The second set could be anyone who passed by. "Oh, stop being reasonable," Agatha snapped. "Reason is useless in missing person cases." Bill stood. "His tracks end at the road. The other person's too. Someone picked him up, or he got into another vehicle." Agatha exhaled through her nose. "If you use one more calm phrase, Bill, I shall scream." Bill patted her shoulder. "We'll figure it out. Don't patronize me." "I'm not. I'm comforting you." "Well, stop that too." She stalked toward the hedgerow, scanning every inch. Nothing but a few crisp leaves and one startled bird. It felt wrong. Agatha trusted her instincts, however chaotic, and something in the scene whispered orchestration. "I hate this," she murmured. "I know," Bill said gently. The drive back to Carsley was tense. Agatha alternated between muttering dark predictions and glaring at passing hedges as if they knew something. Bill remained diplomatically silent. The moment she stepped out of the car, Doris Simpson materialized like a summoned nuisance. "Well?" Doris asked eagerly. "Has James joined a monastery? I hear men his age often do." Agatha stared. "A monastery?" "Yes," Doris said, nodding gravely. "They get tired of worldly concerns." Agatha's voice rose. "James Lacey did not drive to Evesham and abandon his car to join a monastery." "It would explain everything," Doris said serenely. "It would explain nothing." Mrs. Blocksby arrived with a soft smile. "Agatha, how did the search go?" Agatha deflated slightly. "We found footprints and perfume." Mrs. Blocksby's brows lifted. "Perfume?" "Yes," Agatha said dramatically. "The scent of romantic sabotage." Bill sighed. "We don't know that." Agatha ignored him and stomped toward her cottage. She needed tea, possibly wine, probably both. But as she reached the door, she froze. Something lay on the mat. A folded piece of paper. Thick, cream-coloured, like the sort chosen by people who believed stationery reflected character. She snatched it up and unfolded it, Stay out of this. He left by choice. Agatha's jaw dropped. How dare they? Mrs. Blocksby leaned over her shoulder. Oh dear. Bill took the note, studying it. Typed, on an old machine. No fingerprints likely. Agatha fumed. Someone thinks they can frighten me. Mrs. Blocksby placed a comforting hand on her arm. I doubt the purpose is information. It's meant to unsettle you. Well, it succeeded, Agatha snapped. I am deeply unsettled, and therefore more determined. Bill looked at her meaningfully. Agatha, be careful. Careful is for people with hobbies, she retorted. Mrs. Blocksby gave her a sympathetic smile. Please, at least keep me informed. Agatha softened. Of course. Bill tucked the note into a protective sleeve. I'll analyze it. Try to find the typewriter model. Agatha sniffed. Probably belonged to some pompous organization, or someone pretentious enough to enjoy clacking keys. You don't know that. I know enough. Do you? She glared at him. Don't go logical on me. The arrogance, as if she were some nosy amateur who stumbled into mysteries rather than a highly skilled investigator with an award-winning knack for detection. She made tea purely to occupy her hands. Hodge leapt onto the counter despite being banned from it, and watched her with amused golden eyes. Don't start, she muttered. I'm allowed to be irritated. He flicked his tail, unimpressed with human drama. A knock sounded at the door. Agatha swung it open and found Charles Fraith leaning against the frame with an expression of lazy interest. Heard you found James's car, he said, and returned with a scowl dangerous enough to alarm livestock. Agatha thrust the threatening note at him. Read. Charles read it, brow lifting. Well, someone's feeling theatrical. It's not theatrical, Agatha snapped. It's ominous. It's both, Charles said agreeably. And typed. Very retro. Agatha pointed. You know about ridiculous old things. Which typewriter used a font like this? Charles inspected it with exaggerated care. This looks like a Courier variant, the sort used on second-hand typewriters beloved by amateur historians or people who attend reenactment fairs. Agatha froze. Historians? Like the Carsley Historical Society? Charles shrugged. Could be. They hoard antique equipment the way others hoard jam jars. Agatha's pulse quickened. One of them could have written this. Or, Charles said softly, someone wants you to think they did. She hated when Charles made sense. Why implicate them? Maybe to waste your time. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Or maybe they're guilty. Charles rolled his eyes. Please don't charge into the society room waving that note. They bruise easily. I won't wave it, she snapped. I'll present it. Charles chuckled. Same effect. Agatha turned away, pacing again. Perfume, footprints, a threatening note. Someone wants me off this case. You weren't officially on it, Charles pointed out. Now I am, she declared. Charles shook his head. You're impossible. Thank you. She reached for her kettle and switched it on. It let out a soft sigh as it warmed, filling the kitchen with gentle sound. Hodge stretched along the windowsill, tail curling contentedly. Charles leaned against the counter. Whatever's happening, James is too stubborn to vanish quietly. He'll turn up. Agatha stared at the kettle, breathing slowly. He had better. She lifted the note again, reading the words differently now. Not as a threat, as a challenge. Someone wanted to scare her, and nothing infuriated Agatha Raisin more than people who underestimated her. She set the note down, eyes sharpening. Right, she said. I'm going to find whoever typed this. Hodge blinked at her, unimpressed but loyal. The kettle clicked off in quiet agreement, filling the room with a small, resolute warmth. You! Agatha barked as she charged into the Carsley and District Historical Society. Which of you kidnapped James Lacey? The room exploded into choking, spluttering, biscuit-dropping chaos. Elderly members jerked upright in their chairs as if electrified. Mr. Dunkley sent his tea sloshing onto a stack of pamphlets. Mrs. Plimpton clutched her pearls like a Victorian heroine. We did no such thing, Mrs. Plimpton cried. How dare you accuse us? Agatha planted herself firmly at the centre of the table as if launching a coup. Someone typed a threatening note on an antique typewriter. And who owns antique typewriters, you lot? Mrs. Frobisher gasped. Our equipment is for historical documentation. It's for mischief, Agatha corrected sharply. Now talk. Charles Frayth strolled in behind her, hands in pockets, amused. "Do continue, everyone. This is highly educational." Mrs. Plimpton glared at him. "This is a private meeting." "Which is why I came," Charles replied pleasantly. Agatha thumped her handbag down. "James bought a wartime journal from Dalrymple's estate. You knew about it. He told you something, and then he disappeared." "Correlation is not causation," Mr. Dunkley protested. "Spare me your academic flimflammery." Mrs. Blocksby, who had followed discreetly, offered a gentle smile. "Perhaps we should all take a breath." Agatha ignored her. "Start talking. What was in that journal?" Members exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Mrs. Plimpton spoke. "Marcus Dalrymple was not an easy man. His family maintained land rights through questionable claims." "Questionable how?" Agatha demanded. Mr. Dunkley cleared his throat. "There were rumours that during the war, Marcus altered certain documents to acquire land previously farmed by a cousin. The cousin then vanished. No foul play proved, of course." "Vanished?" Agatha repeated sharply. "And James bought a journal belonging to this charming ancestor." "A relative brought it to the estate sale," Mrs. Plimpton said. "We never saw its contents." Agatha scrutinized them. They shifted under her gaze like schoolchildren caught cheating. "Did any of you ask James about it?" Mrs. Plimpton hesitated. "He visited us the day before he disappeared. Wanted background on Marcus." "And what did you tell him?" "That the Dalrymples dislike public discussion," she admitted. Charles leaned forward. "Did you warn James to keep quiet?" "No," she said quickly. "We simply suggested discretion." Agatha pounced. "Discretion that conveniently ended with him gone?" Mrs. Blocksby intervened softly. "Agatha, dear, let them speak." But Agatha was in full momentum. "What aren't you telling me?" Silence. Then Mr. Dunkley swallowed. "Some believe the journal contained a confession." Agatha straightened. "A confession to what?" Mrs. Frobisher interjected brightly. "I saw James sneaking into the pub with a woman last week. Looked guilty as sin." Agatha spun round. "What woman?" "Tall, blonde, wore a red scarf." "That again? Do you people think scarves are rare currency?" "I saw her," Mrs. Frobisher insisted. "He was whispering to her." Mrs. Blocksby cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Frobisher, dear, you saw Mr. Pemberton's nephew last week. He was visiting from Brighton. Quite tall, quite blonde." Mrs. Frobisher blinked. "Oh, so it wasn't James?" "No." Agatha threw up her hands. "Wonderful! Another red herring." Charles grinned. "At least it adds colour." Agatha turned back to the group. "Tell me more about this vanished relative." Mr. Dunkley shifted uncomfortably. "Stories say he challenged Marcus's claim to certain acreage. They argued. The cousin left for London, never returned." "And the family buried it," Agatha said. "More or less," Mrs. Plimpton admitted. "So James was asking questions about family secrets," Agatha summarized. "Secrets someone might kill for." Mrs. Plimpton gasped. "No one said kill." Agatha waved that away. "Fine. Secrets someone might menace for. Better?" "No," cried the entire room. Charles watched Agatha with fond exasperation. "Darling, perhaps tone down the accusations." "Why? They're hiding something." Mr. Dunkley bristled. "We are historians. We preserve facts." Agatha snorted. "You preserve grudges." Mrs. Blocksby stepped forward. "Let's remain civil. We're trying to help James." The mention of James softened Agatha slightly. She inhaled, reined in her tone. "Look, someone typed a warning on an old typewriter. It wasn't a child's toy. It was adult, heavy, and dramatic. That fits this group." Mrs. Plimpton gasped. "Our typewriter is locked in the archive cabinet. Hardly used." Agatha fixed her eyes on her. "Show me." The society members led her to a small cabinet in the corner. The typewriter sat neatly inside, covered with a cloth, smelling faintly of old ink and good intentions. Agatha inspected it. Could have typed the note. "Its ribbon is dry," Mrs. Plimpton argued. "We haven't used it in months." Agatha checked. She was right. The ribbon was brittle, cracked. The keys left faint impressions. Not the culprit. "Fine," Agatha said. "But someone used another machine." Charles leaned against the wall. "Better question. Who else owns a typewriter in this village?" Mr. Dunkley sighed. "Several older residents collect them." "So the threat could have come from anywhere." Charles said mildly. Agatha turned on him. Don't be reasonable. I loathe reason right now. He gave her a wink. After strong-arming the society into promising cooperation, Agatha and Charles walked back toward the lane. Well, Charles asked, did we learn anything besides the fact that historians are dramatic? We learned the journal belonged to Marcus Dalrymple, Agatha said, thinking aloud, and his nephew Colin is 10 times more suspicious now. Charles nodded. He has a reputation, grudges, temper, secrecy, lives alone, doesn't enjoy visitors. Which explains his hostility, Agatha muttered. It explains yours too, Charles said cheerfully. Shut up. As they approached Colin's workshop, Agatha's stride sharpened. If he knows something, I'll drag it out of him. Charles placed a gentle hand on her arm. Agatha, perhaps ease into it. No, I like direct confrontation. It suits me. She rapped loudly on the workshop door. After a long moment, it opened a crack. Colin Dalrymple glared out. Oh, you again. Yes, me again, Agatha said, and I'm not leaving until you talk. Colin scowled. I told you, I don't know anything. Liar, Agatha snapped. You sold the journal. I didn't, he corrected sharply. A distant relation sold it. Part of your family drama, Agatha said, and James acquired it. You knew. I don't care about the past, Colin growled. Funny, Agatha said. You seem terrified of it. His eyes narrowed. Get off my property. Agatha stepped forward. Where is James Lacey? How should I know? Colin demanded. I barely spoke to him. You argued with him? No, I didn't. You knew he'd discovered something. Colin's fists clenched. Leave. Charles touched Agatha's arm. We're done here. But Agatha wasn't ready to retreat. She glanced at the ground and froze. At the edge of the path, half hidden by disturbed gravel, lay a fine sprinkle of dark cigar ash. Agatha knelt. This wasn't here yesterday. Colin stiffened. People walk past. People don't smoke cigars this strong, Agatha said. Not unless they're trying to fumigate villagers. Charles crouched beside her. This ash matches the scent near James's gate. Agatha stood slowly. Colin, why is the same cigar ash outside your workshop in James's cottage? Colin's face went white, then red. Coincidence. No such thing, Agatha said coldly. But before she could press further, he slammed the door hard enough to rattle the hinges. Agatha stared at the closed door, rage and certainty tightening inside her. He knows something. Charles nodded thoughtfully. It's possible. Possible. It's obvious. He smoked those cigars near James's house. He left ash. He lied about contact. Charles lifted a calming hand. Agatha, don't leap to conclusions without proof. I'm not leaping, she snapped. I'm deducing. Wildly. She glared. If he's innocent, I'll apologize. Loudly. But if he's lying, I'll make him confess. Charles gave her a small, admiring smile. I do love when you're terrifying. Agatha huffed, but a faint glow of satisfaction warmed her. They walked back toward her cottage. Hodge was curled in the window, sunning himself with regal disinterest. When Agatha opened the door, he stretched luxuriously and blinked at her as if to ask whether she had finally accomplished something sensible. Agatha scooped him up. We're close, Hodge. I know it. Hodge purred, surveying her triumphantly, as if he had solved the case himself. She set him down, put the kettle on, and let her thoughts settle. Colin Dalrymple was hiding something, and Agatha Raisin always uncovered hidden things, eventually. The kettle sighed softly, Hodge curled by the warm oven, and Agatha allowed herself one quiet moment of determined calm. Tomorrow, she would confront the truth. Tonight, she would sharpen her claws. You have the decorative taste of a garage sale hosted by trolls, Agatha announced as she marched into Colin Dalrymple's workshop. Piles of metal scraps towered precariously, and a large, unidentifiable contraption hummed resentfully in the corner. Charles followed her with a grin, clearly enjoying the chaos. Colin scowled. What do you want now? Agatha swept an accusing arm around the room. Confession, answers, preferably both. Charles offered a polite wave. Lovely decor, by the way. Very industrial medieval. Colin ignored him. His jaw twitched. I already told you. I don't know where James is. Agatha stepped closer. Liar. Colin's eyes widened indignantly. I have not lied. Oh, yes, you have, Agatha said. You lied yesterday. You claimed you barely spoke to James, but you left cigar ash outside his cottage, and another pile outside your workshop. You smoke where you worry. Colin swallowed hard. You're mistaken. Charles leaned casually against a cluttered bench. Agatha's rarely mistaken when she's this furious. Thank you, Agatha said. That wasn't a compliment. Still counts. Colin ran a hand through his hair. Look, you're twisting everything. I've smoked cigars for years. But only certain heavy cigars, Agatha retorted, and they match the scent Bill found near James's gate. Colin shifted uncomfortably. Coincidence. Agatha planted her hands on her hips. That excuse won't work. I know you met James. I didn't abduct him. Then tell us what you did do, she demanded. Colin hesitated. His shoulders drooped. All right, fine. He came here 2 days before he disappeared. Agatha shot Charles a triumphant look. Charles raised both eyebrows in smug confirmation. And why, Agatha pressed, did you fail to mention this earlier? Because I didn't want trouble, Colin muttered. Trouble's what you've got, Agatha snapped. Colin slumped onto a nearby stool. He showed me the journal, Marcus's journal, my uncle's. I didn't even know it still existed. Agatha tapped her foot impatiently. And then? He asked about our family history, Colin said bitterly. Wanted to know about Marcus's wartime work. Wanted to know why the old land disputes were never resolved. Charles frowned. Because Marcus allegedly forged documents. Colin stiffened. Yes. Agatha stepped closer. So the rumours were true. Colin spread his hands helplessly. My uncle was a complicated man. Ambitious. Ruthless. If he hid the truth about the land, it wasn't out of malice, but determination. That sounds like a flowery excuse, Agatha said. Colin glared. I'm not defending him. I'm explaining the history James uncovered. Agatha narrowed her eyes. Which terrified you? Colin winced. I didn't want the Dalrymple name dragged through mud. The family's already shrinking. Old scandals could ruin what little respect remains. So you threatened James, Agatha concluded. Colin shot upright. No, I warned him. I begged him not to stir old ghosts. He agreed. He said he wasn't looking to make trouble. And then he vanished, Agatha said pointedly. How convenient. Colin shook his head miserably. I swear I didn't touch him. I didn't follow him. I didn't harm him. Agatha crossed her arms. Then why did you run yesterday when we mentioned the ash? Because I panicked, Colin burst. Every time someone mentions James, I picture that cursed journal exploding into headlines. I didn't want you sniffing around. So you lied, Agatha said. Yes, Colin admitted heavily. And I'm ashamed. Agatha studied him. His shoulders sagged. His voice trembled. He looked less like a villain hiding secrets and more like a man terrified of legacy. She hated when people turned out to be complicated. All right, she said reluctantly. Let's assume you're innocent. I am. Allegedly, she added. Charles coughed lightly. Agatha, he's telling the truth. You can't know that, Charles pointed at Colin. He lacks the upper body strength to kidnap James. I resent that, Colin muttered. Agatha ignored him. If you didn't take him, who did? Who else knew about the journal? Colin hesitated again. Someone from Evesham. Agatha straightened. What someone? I don't know his name, Colin said, but he asked around, wanted to know if the journal contained any legal vulnerabilities. Charles frowned. What sort of vulnerabilities? Land ownership, Colin answered. Family disputes, missing heir. The land's technically worth a fortune if the original heir had descendants. Agatha felt a spark ignite. So someone else believed the journal proved something. Yes, Colin whispered. James said he sensed danger. He promised he'd hide the journal if necessary. Agatha blinked. Hide it where? I don't know. Agatha exhaled sharply. So, we have a mysterious man from Evesham asking questions about land claims, James worried, and you panicking over family skeletons. Colin nodded miserably. Do you know what this means? Agatha said. Charles nodded. James left clues. Colin shook his head desperately. You must believe me. I didn't harm him. I never would. Agatha studied him closely. His hands trembled. His breath came unevenly. His eyes held no malice, only fear. "You're innocent," she said slowly. "Yes." "But you're also a fool," she added. "Yes," Colin admitted again. Agatha turned to Charles. "I suppose we can't arrest him." "Not without a police badge," Charles said. "And competence," Agatha added. Charles smirked. "True." Agatha gathered her bag. "Colin, if you remember anything else, call me, day or night." Colin nodded. "I will." Agatha headed toward the workshop door. Charles followed, then paused to inspect a bizarre metal sculpture shaped like a furious chicken. "Do you weld these on purpose?" he asked. Colin groaned. "Please leave." Agatha stepped outside and inhaled deeply. Well, that was exhausting. "You were magnificent," Charles said cheerfully, "like a small, furious general." Agatha shot him a look. "I prefer fearsome investigator." He offered a gallant gesture. "Fearsome investigator it is." They walked toward the village lane. Agatha's mind raced. "A man from Evesham," she repeated, asking questions about land, inheritance, missing heir. Someone desperate. "Someone dangerous," Charles agreed. Agatha halted. James knew this man wanted the journal, so he hid it somewhere obvious but safe. Charles nodded. "Which means someone else might already be searching." Agatha Blocksby admitted softly. "Several villagers mentioned it. They thought you should know." Agatha swallowed. A prickling sensation crept down her spine. "So, he's here?" Mrs. Blocksby rested a hand on her arm. "Please be careful, dear." "I will," Agatha said, voice low. "I'm not afraid." Mrs. Blocksby offered a kind smile. "Fear isn't weakness, but recklessness can be." Agatha forced a confident smirk. "Reckless? Me? Never." Mrs. Blocksby laughed softly. "Of course not." Agatha walked her to the door. When Mrs. Blocksby left, Hodge padded over, rubbing against her leg with unexpected affection. She lifted him and held him close. "Well, my boy," she said quietly, "it seems someone thinks I'm getting too close to the truth." Hodge yawned, unconcerned. Agatha set him down, straightened her posture, and marched to the kitchen. The kettle clicked on with a comforting sigh. She watched the steam curl upward, determination warming her chest. "Let him lurk," she muttered. "I'm ready." Hodge stretched luxuriously, claiming his place by the oven, tail curling like a punctuation mark on her resolve. Tomorrow she would hunt the stranger. Tonight she would prepare. "Hodge, if you knock over that plant again, I swear I will enroll you in obedience school," Agatha hissed as the cat batted at a wilting geranium. He ignored her, naturally, tail flicking like a metronome of contempt. Agatha bent to rescue the pot, and froze. A figure lurked near the hedge. Not a villager, not a neighbour stopping by for gossip. A tall shape pressed close to the boundary of her garden, half hidden, too still. Agatha straightened abruptly. "Oi, you! What do you think you're doing?" The figure bolted. Agatha surged forward, tripping over a decorative stone chicken, catching herself on a rosebush, and tearing after him down the lane in heels she had absolutely no business running in. "Stop, you coward!" she shouted, breath sharp, pride sharper. The man sprinted past the vicarage corner. Agatha managed 10 more furious steps before physics, as usual, betrayed her. Her heel sank into a rut. She lurched forward, arms flailing, and nearly face-planted into a bramble patch. The stranger vanished around the bend. Agatha ripped her shoe free and swore colourfully. Blasted country lanes, blasted footwear, blasted man. Hodge, having followed at a leisurely trot, meowed judgmentally. Agatha stomped back to the hedge and stopped again. Something glinted faintly in the grass. She crouched and retrieved a bus ticket, slightly crumpled, stamped Evesham, single. Beneath it lay a torn scrap of paper with hurried writing. Telephone box, 9 p.m. Agatha felt the familiar spark of triumph. "Got you," she muttered. Charles arrived 20 minutes later, summoned through a phone call laced with impatience and righteous fury. "Why is it," he asked mildly, "that every time I visit you're in a state of crisis?" "Because people insist on causing crises," Agatha snapped. "I simply respond heroically." Charles eyed her torn stocking. "Heroically? Don't start." She thrust the ticket at him. "Our lurker dropped this." Charles examined it. "Evesham, popular destination for brooding villains." "And this?" She handed him the scrap. "Telephone box, 9 p.m., he read. "Agatha, no, absolutely not. You are not luring strangers in the dark." "I'm not luring him," she said indignantly. "He's already expecting me." "He's expecting whoever dropped this too." Charles folded his arms. "Which is not necessarily you." "I don't care," Agatha declared. "We're going." Charles groaned. "I knew you'd say that." "Then stop complaining and fetch your coat." At 8:59 p.m., Agatha and Charles stood beside the old red telephone box on the edge of the village green. It glowed faintly under the street lamp, lonely and antiquated, smelling of old receipts and rust. "Stay behind me," Agatha said, puffing up. "I am staying exactly behind you," Charles answered, moving even further behind her. "You're supposed to be brave." "I'm brave when necessary." "This is necessary." "That's subjective." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Just try not to hide behind the phone box if someone coughs." Before Charles could reply, footsteps approached. Light, uncertain. A man stepped into the lamplight, thin, pale, with nervous eyes darting like trapped birds. He clutched a satchel to his chest. "Miss Raisin?" he whispered. Agatha stiffened. "Yes," he exhaled shakily. "Thank God. I didn't know who'd come, or if anyone would. I've been terrified all day." Charles peered over Agatha's shoulder. "Who are you?" "Philip Tremaine," the man said, swallowing hard. I'm a researcher. I specialize in wartime civilian records. I'd hoped to buy the journal from Mr. Lacey." Agatha's suspicion sharpened. "And why didn't you say so earlier?" "Because I'm a coward," Tremaine confessed miserably. "Someone watched me while I waited for him. I panicked and fled." "And James?" Agatha's voice tightened. Tremaine wrung his hands. "He contacted me the night he disappeared, said he had urgent new information, asked me to meet him here, at 9, but he never arrived." Agatha exchanged a tense glance with Charles. "Why did you want the journal?" she demanded. Tremaine's eyes widened. "For research. Nothing sinister. I write local histories. The Dalrymple Journal referenced code names used in early wartime land transfers. It might clarify several unresolved disputes." "Disputes worth killing for?" Agatha pressed. "No," Tremaine squeaked. "Well, possibly. I mean, land ownership can inflame families. But I never meant harm." Agatha studied him. His suit was crumpled, his hair disheveled. He had the general posture of an anxious librarian forced into the outdoors. Charles leaned in. "Did James tell you anything specific during the call?" Tremaine nodded eagerly. "Yes. He believed someone else was after the journal. He said he'd found a coded message hidden inside it. Something about a location. He said he needed to check it before meeting me." Agatha felt her pulse quicken. "A coded message pointing to where?" "I'm not sure," Tremaine admitted. "He wouldn't say, but he sounded urgent, frightened." Agatha straightened. "So James left willingly to follow a clue?" "Possibly," Tremaine said. "But then he vanished. And later that night, I felt someone watching me. Tall, broad-shouldered. I couldn't see his face." Agatha's spine prickled. "The same stranger seen near my cottage." "A likely match," Charles murmured. Tremaine's hands shook. "I swear I had nothing to do with it." Agatha nodded slowly. "If you did, you wouldn't be confessing in a freezing telephone box." "I'm sorry," Tremaine said faintly. "I panicked when you chased me earlier." Agatha blinked. "That was you?" "Yes, I wanted to talk, but then your cat glared at me and you shouted and, well, I'm easily spooked." Charles laughed softly. "You ran from Hodge?" "Hodge can be intimidating," Agatha sniffed. Tremaine looked mortified. "I didn't mean to frighten you earlier. I just needed to know if anyone had found James." "Not yet," Agatha said grimly, "but we're getting close." Charles asked, "This coded message, what form did it take?" "A series of initials," Tremaine said, "written in the margin. James believed it pointed to a physical place, somewhere significant to Marcus Dalrymple." "Dalrymple again," Agatha muttered. "I'm getting sick of that name." "The journal may still be hidden," Tremaine whispered. "If James hid it to keep it safe, we might locate him by finding it." Agatha's thoughts sparked rapidly. "Do you know any Dalrymple properties not on public record?" "One," Tremaine said. "A small storage shed near the old quarry. Marcus used it during the war. It doesn't appear on newer maps." Agatha's breath caught. A secret shed. Perfect. Charles frowned. Agatha, we can't just charge off in the dark. Of course not, she said. We'll charge off in daylight, tomorrow. Tremaine sagged with relief. Thank you. I didn't know who else to trust. Agatha softened slightly. You did the right thing coming here. Charles, however, eyed Tremaine. If you're lying— I'm not, Tremaine squeaked. I'm dreadful at lying. My mother says my face betrays me immediately. Agatha nodded. She's correct. Tremaine flushed. Agatha stepped closer. One last question. Why were you lurking outside my garden earlier? Tremaine swallowed. I was gathering courage to approach you. I knew you were investigating. I thought you might help, but then you shouted and I panicked. Agatha sighed. You should have knocked. I was afraid, he admitted. Most people are when meeting Agatha, Charles muttered. Agatha elbowed him sharply. Tremaine clutched his satchel. Please, find James. He isn't the type to vanish. Agatha's voice lowered. No, he isn't. The telephone box hummed faintly. The night around them felt charged, not with danger, but with direction. We'll find him, Agatha said, and we'll start with the shed. Tremaine nodded fervently. I'll give you the exact location. Tomorrow, Agatha repeated. You go home now, and don't talk to strangers unless they're shorter than you. Tremaine blinked. Why shorter? Because tall ones flee too quickly. Charles snorted. Sage advice. Tremaine hurried off, nearly tripping over a paving stone. When he disappeared from view, Charles turned to Agatha. Well, that was thrilling. Terrifying for him, Agatha said. Annoying for me. And heroic for me, Charles added. You hid behind me, Agatha reminded him. I was preparing to leap forward dramatically if necessary. It wasn't necessary. Tragedy, he sighed. Agatha shook her head, but a faint smile warmed her. They walked home together, the quiet lanes guiding them back toward Castley's familiar cluster of lights. Hodge greeted her at the door, tail swishing in disdain. Agatha scooped him up, ignoring his offended squawk. We're close, Hodge, she murmured. James left clues, and tomorrow we'll find the place he went. Hodge settled against her shoulder, purring faintly. Agatha set him down, switched on the kettle, and watched steam curl upward like a beckoning trail. Tonight, she would rest. Tomorrow, she would follow James's last steps, and she wouldn't stop until she found him. Agatha's foot tapped with rising impatience as Bill checked his notes beside the police car. If we don't get going, she snapped, James will have grown a beard long enough to braid. Charles stretched lazily against his convertible. Honestly, Aggie, you're acting as if we're hunting a fugitive, not an absent-minded bachelor. He isn't absent-minded, she shot back. He's infuriating, pompous, evasive, and entirely incapable of vanishing without causing chaos, which is precisely why we're going. Bill gave her a steady look. We're following Tremaine's statement. Nothing more. No dramatic leaps. Agatha sniffed, a gesture which usually implied she was about to execute several dramatic leaps at once. Twilight or not, we're searching Blackthorn Wood. If James used that coded message, then somewhere out there he left a trail, and we're going to find it before someone else does. Charles held up a hand. Before we march into a forest like amateur scouts, can we at least agree on roles? I don't intend to be eaten by a badger because you insisted on taking the lead. You'll take the lead because you're taller, Agatha barked, and because you once went to a boarding school with compulsory rambling. Bill sighed, resigned. Let's go before the light fails any further. Agatha strode ahead, brushing off a bramble as though personally insulted by its existence. Blackthorn Wood loomed before them, thick and uneven, trees clutching shadows like gossip they refused to share. The narrow entry path felt claustrophobic. Branches reached low, forcing Charles to duck. Watch the mud, Charles muttered, eyeing his shoes. It's treacherous. Your shoes are treacherous, Agatha replied. Who wears suede into a woodland investigation? They'll dissolve. They're Italian, he said, as if that excused everything. The three pressed deeper. Bill's torch cast a faint beam ahead, catching flashes of undergrowth. Agatha scanned every tuft of moss, every broken twig. Her mind ticked through possibilities, each more urgent than the last. James had contacted Tremaine. James had intended to meet him. James had never arrived. Now Blackthorn Wood held the next answer, or the next threat. Here, Bill said softly. The The path opened into a clearing no larger than a modest kitchen. At the far end sat a half-collapsed hut, barely more than timber ribs and weathered planks. Moss grew thick along one side. The door leaned at an angle as if drunk. Agatha exhaled, a mix of dread and determination tightening her chest. "He was here," she murmured. "I can feel it." Charles shuddered theatrically. "What you feel is mildew." Bill stepped forward, pushing the crooked door. It creaked open. Dust rose in a lazy swirl, settling over the dim interior. The single window had lost its glass decades ago. A narrow camp bed sat against a wall, its thin blanket disturbed as if someone had risen in haste. Agatha stepped inside. "Bill, shine the light there." Near the foot of the bed sat a matchbox, half spilled. Beside it lay the remains of a newspaper page, crumpled and torn. A faint scent of something sharp, disinfectant perhaps, hung in the air. "This was recent," Bill murmured, kneeling. "Days, not weeks." Agatha pressed her lips together. She swung toward a loose board in the floor, its edge slightly raised. "What's that?" Bill lifted the plank carefully, light angled downward. Something glinted. Agatha's breath caught. James's wallet. She seized it with unsteady fingers. It felt cold, heavier than it should, as though storing the weight of her anxiety. "He would never leave this," she whispered. "Never. Not willingly." Bill frowned. "It looks intact. Cards, license, no money missing. Strange." "Strange," Agatha's voice cracked. "It's terrifying." Charles peered over her shoulder with uncharacteristic seriousness. "If he left it, he didn't go alone." A thick silence followed, broken only by Bill examining the floor. "There's a scuff here. Someone slipped, or there was a brief struggle." Agatha steadied herself, spine stiffening. "Someone dragged him out. They must have. And if I find out who did—" "Careful," Charles murmured. "You're shaking." "I'm furious," she shot back, "and frightened, and furious about being frightened." Bill moved toward the door. "There's more outside. Come look." They stepped back into the clearing. Bill's torch followed a set of impressions near the hut's entrance, one shallow, one deeper. "These could be James's," Bill said, gesturing to the lighter set. Size and pattern fit his usual shoes. "And the deeper ones?" Agatha asked. "Someone heavier, likely male." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "A kidnapper?" "We don't know that," Bill cautioned, though worry threaded his tone. "But someone else was here. Recently." Charles raised a hand suddenly. "Did you hear that?" A rustle at the tree line, a quick, sharp movement. Then a dark figure bolted through the undergrowth, sprinting away from them. Agatha didn't hesitate. "Stop!" she bellowed and launched after him. "Agatha!" Bill called, but she was already tearing down the slope, branches whipping her jacket. Her heels, foolish, impractical, stubborn, clattered against roots. She swore with every step, her breath coming in furious bursts. "Come back here, you coward!" The figure darted left. Agatha followed, ignoring the sting of brambles snagging her tights. For a moment she gained ground. Then her heel sank deep into mud. "Oh, for—" She wrenched free, nearly toppling, just in time to see the figure vanish into thicker trees. Something fell from his hand, a small object that bounced once and rolled toward a bush. Charles reached her, panting. "You're mad," he gasped. "Utterly mad." "Get that," Agatha commanded, pointing. Charles retrieved it and held it up. A slim cigar case, polished metal, engraved with 2 letters. C.D. "Colin Dalrymple," Agatha breathed. "Again." "It could be planted," Bill said, arriving behind them. "It might not be his." "Oh, Bill, must you always be reasonable? Of course it's planted. It's too convenient." Agatha huffed, brushing mud from her skirt. "Someone wants us chasing the wrong man." Charles wiped his shoes miserably. "This might be the dirtiest I've ever been. I'd like the record to state that I tried to stay clean." "You're the physical stamina of a wilted lettuce," Agatha replied. "Now let's regroup. That chase proved one thing. Someone doesn't want us snooping around." Back at the clearing, Bill re-examined the ground near the hut. "Look here." Footprints again, but these angled away from the hut. Deeper, more decisive. They trailed through the trees, heading north. "Where do those lead?" Charles asked, leaning in. Bill consulted his map. "Toward an abandoned farm. It once belonged to Marcus Dalrymple." Agatha's pulse quickened. "The uncle with the scandal, the journal's original owner." Bill nodded. "If James uncovered something sensitive, and someone else wanted that information buried, Agatha felt a cold shiver. Then James may have been taken from here to that farm. Charles adjusted his scarf. Then we check the farm next. But only when we're prepared. It's getting dark. Agatha bristled. I don't care about the dark. No, Bill said gently, but we need proper backup. Let's start fresh tomorrow. Agatha looked from Bill to Charles, then to the hut, silent, brooding, withholding the truth she craved. The wallet weighed heavy in her hand, a symbol of James's absence and her own desperation. Fine, she muttered. Tomorrow. But I'm not letting anyone sleep while James is missing. Charles smiled faintly. I didn't expect you to. You're terrifying when determined. Agatha gave him a curt nod, though a flicker of warmth touched her expression. She turned away before it could show too clearly. Back at her cottage, exhaustion dragged at her limbs. She dropped her muddied shoes by the door. Hodge appeared immediately, tail flicking with haughty curiosity. He sniffed her hem as if conducting an investigation of his own. Yes, yes, Agatha murmured, scratching his head. I know I smell like forest panic. Hodge gave a soft chirp, judgment mixed with welcome. Agatha set James's wallet on the table. Its mute presence filled the room with unease. She stared at it, arms folded, wrestling with a swirl of dread and determination. Someone took him, she whispered, whether you faint or not. I don't faint, Charles muttered, though he edged closer to Bill like a man making peace with his own obituary. The farmhouse loomed ahead in the late afternoon light, its crooked windows glaring like tired eyes. Agatha felt a tight pinch of dread beneath her ribs, but refused to acknowledge it. Fear was a luxury for people with better hair. Bill pushed open the door, and it creaked like an elderly gossip preparing to speak. Stay behind me, he murmured, sweeping his torch across the hall. Oh, do stop being heroic, Agatha said, stepping in front of him. If James is inside, he'll respond better to my voice than your constable routine. Or he'll run, Charles muttered. Agatha ignored him. The hallway smelled of dust, old rope, and something sour that made her wrinkle her nose. Wrappers littered the floor, and a lantern sat crookedly on a crate. Someone had been here recently. Bill crouched beside a pile of rope fibers. Cut clean, he murmured. Someone tied something, possibly someone, and removed it quickly. Agatha's heart thumped, but she deployed the emergency measure all raisins used in emotional crises. Irritation. Brilliant deduction, Sherlock. Shall we frame it for the museum? Charles pointed to a dark patch on the table. Ash, but not Collins' brand. Smells cheap. Agatha inhaled sharply. You're right. Collins smokes those overpriced, pretentious cigars that scream, "Look at me." This stuff smells like something bought from a petrol station. So someone's trying to imitate him, Bill said, or frame him. Agatha felt a throb of relief. She might loathe Colin Dalrymple's arrogance, but he didn't strike her as the kidnapping type, merely the insufferable when ignored type. They climbed the stairs, creaking, soft, betraying every step, and Agatha's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Something was close. Bill pushed open the first door. Empty. The second door. Empty. At the third, Agatha shoved him aside. "James!" she shouted. He was there. Slumped on an old iron bedstead, pale, with his shirt askew and his hair rebelliously charming, even in unconsciousness. His wallet lay on the floor nearby, half under the bed frame, as if forgotten during a struggle. Agatha's breath left her in a shocked gust. "Oh, thank God, James!" Charles knelt beside him. "He's breathing, pulse steady, just sedated, I'd guess." Bill inspected the room. No restraints, no injuries, he wasn't tortured. Agatha bristled. Well, that's a very low bar for reassurance. She shook James's shoulder gently. His eyelids fluttered, then opened weakly. "Agatha?" His voice was a whisper dragged through exhaustion. "Yes, I'm here," she said, harsher than she meant. "Honestly, James, if this is some elaborate excuse to avoid dinner with the vicar, I am not amused." He managed a fractured smile. Lena Maddox." Agatha stiffened. "Who?" James's head lolled, consciousness slipping again. "Lena, historian, wanted the journal. I tried to help." Then he fainted, elegantly, like a man practiced in dramatic exits. "Well, that's helpful," Charles said. "At least he didn't name you as his captor. That must be a relief." Shut up, Charles. Bill checked James one more time. He'll recover soon. Best get him outside. Agatha, stay between him and the stairs. Agatha did, striding like a protective lioness with a questionable manicure. They eased James toward the landing. A noise jerked all three around. Footsteps, rapid, heading down the far hall. "Someone's here!" Agatha hissed. She bolted before either man could protest, heels clattering like castanets of doom. A shadow darted down the stairs, leaping the broken steps with ease. "Stop!" Agatha barked, charging after the figure. "I refuse to chase one more criminal in unsuitable footwear." She nearly caught him when her heel lodged in a floorboard, flinging her forward with an undignified squawk. She ripped the shoe free and continued barefoot, murder in her eyes. Bill and Charles reached the yard seconds after her, just in time to see the figure vanish into the hedgerow. Agatha bent, snatching something from the ground. A cigar case! Charles took it, flipping it open. Engraved CD. "Colin Dalrymple again," Agatha said grimly. "This is ridiculous. He could barely outrun a cheese wheel." Bill examined it thoughtfully. "This is too convenient. Left right where we'd see it." "So someone planted it," Agatha said. "Looks that way." "Then we focus on who benefits," she added, "which at the moment seems to be absolutely no one, except whoever wants to frame Colin." Charles brushed dirt from his trousers. "A ridiculous plan. The man is pompous, not villainous." Agatha's gaze shifted toward the tree line. "Someone was watching us. Someone who wanted that case found." Bill moved toward a faint line of disturbed bracken. Footprints. Fresh. Leading toward the old Dalrymple farm at Lower Blackthorn. Agatha's stomach clenched. Another Dalrymple building? Honestly, has no one in that family ever heard of spring cleaning? Charles sighed. "You realize this is technically trespassing." "Oh, do shut up. Bring James to my cottage. Keep him warm. I'm not waiting while this mystery tap dances through the countryside." "I'm coming with you," Charles said. "No," Bill cut in. "I'm coming with Agatha. Charles, you get James home. Now." Charles glared. "I am not a porter." "You are today," Agatha snapped. "And be gentle. He's been kidnapped." Charles saluted lazily. "If he wakes and asks for tea, I'll tell him you said he deserves only hot water." "Move." Charles departed, hauling James with an exaggerated sigh. Once he was gone, Bill turned to Agatha. "You're frightened," he said quietly. "I am furious," Agatha corrected. "And when I'm furious, I stop being sensible. Now lead on." They entered the narrow path that wound toward Lower Blackthorn. The trees whispered overhead, the sort of sound that made even stable people uneasy. Agatha and stable people had never shared a postcode. Bill paused. "Footprints continue here. Same depth, same stride, not Colin's." "How can you tell?" "He has shorter legs." Agatha blinked. "How do you know that?" Bill flushed slightly. Police notice things. They followed the prints to the abandoned farm. Creaking barn doors, broken windows, the faint smell of damp and long-forgotten hay. Agatha braced herself. "Ready?" Bill murmured. "No," she said. "But I'd rather be reckless than right." They stepped inside. It was darker than the farmhouse, shadows clinging to the beams like gossip with claws. Agatha strained to listen. Creaks, the faint stirring of a bird, perhaps a mouse, but no human sound. Bill's torch slid across the floor, catching rope fibers, food wrappers, and scuff marks. "Someone's been staying here." Agatha walked farther in. Rope again, wrappers again, ash again. Honestly, criminals are so predictable. Different ash, Bill noted. Cheaper brand, same as the farmhouse. "So not Colin." "Correct." Bill moved toward the stairs. "Let me check up there." Agatha followed, unable to stay still. The staircase groaned beneath them, but she pressed forward, gripping the railing like it had personally offended her. They reached the upper landing. 2 doors. Bill moved to the left, Agatha the right. She pushed hers open and gasped. A lantern burned low on a crate, papers scattered across the floor. And in the corner, crouched behind an overturned chair, a woman rose slowly. Her hair was wild, her glasses cracked, her expression pinched with defiance and desperation. Lena Maddox. "So, you've found me," she whispered. Agatha squared her shoulders. "Yes, and I'm about to make your life extremely inconvenient." Lena lifted a heavy ledger in trembling hands. "Stay back. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Bill stepped beside Agatha. "Put it down, Lena. No one's hurt." "I had to hide him," Lena blurted. "I needed time to find the coded location. Marcus Dalrymple lied about everything. His fraud ruined my career. When James refused to give me the journal, I panicked." Agatha felt something hot coil in her chest, rage mixed with something dangerously close to understanding. "You kidnapped him because your career stalled," she demanded. "I didn't hurt him. I sedated him lightly. I fed him. "Oh, congratulations," Agatha snapped. "Mother Teresa with a crowbar." Lena's eyes darted toward the stairs. "I only needed the journal, but he hid it before I could get it." "Where?" Agatha barked. "I don't know," Lena wailed. "He never told me. I was searching the hut, the farmhouse, everywhere." "You planted the cigar case," Bill said quietly. "To distract you," she said. "I needed more time." Agatha stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "James could have died, and I would have personally hunted you across continents to make your life miserable." Lena blinked rapidly. I know. I'm sorry." Agatha inhaled. "Put the ledger down." Lena hesitated. Bill made a small movement. Lena bolted. She swung past them, scrambling down the stairs with the grace of a startled chicken. Bill followed, shouting for her to stop. Agatha barreled after them. "Oh, no, you don't. I've had enough running today to qualify for the Olympics." They burst into the farmyard. Lena sprinted toward the hedgerow and promptly tripped over a rusted milk churn. She flew forward with a shriek, ledger sailing into the air and landing with an undignified slap in a puddle. Agatha reached her first. "Ha!" Bill arrived, breathless but triumphant. "Lena Maddox, you are under arrest for unlawful restraint, impersonation, and frankly terrible decision-making." Lena wept into the dirt. "I only wanted the truth." Agatha folded her arms. "Yes, well, so do we. And we manage it without kidnapping people." Bill escorted Lena away, radio crackling faintly. Charles arrived moments later, looking put upon but intact. "James is awake," he announced, "and demanding tea." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Of course he is." Charles smirked. "He also asked where you were." Agatha felt warmth flutter traitorously in her chest. "Yes, well, someone had to do the actual solving." As the police car took Lena away, Agatha remained a moment longer, staring at the farmhouse, the fields beyond, the faint scuff marks of struggle. James had survived. The journal remained hidden, and Agatha Raisin, tired, furious, triumphant, had one last task: to march home and demand an explanation over a kettle that always boiled too slowly. Hodge met her at the cottage door, tail flicking, eyes accusing. "Oh, don't start," she muttered, stepping inside. "Yes, I'm late. Yes, you're hungry. And yes, James Lacey is alive. Try not to look disappointed." Hodge yawned elaborately. The kettle sighed, and Agatha felt, just for a heartbeat, safe again. "Don't fuss," James muttered, which was rather bold coming from a man propped up with 3 cushions and a blanket tucked around him like an invalid from a Victorian novel. "I'm not fussing," Agatha snapped, adjusting the blanket anyway. "I'm supervising." James groaned softly. "Agatha, really? If you say there was no danger, I will smother you with your own duvet," she warned. Hodge, unhelpfully loyal to whichever human currently held the least resentment, leapt onto James's lap and curled contentedly. James stroked him with the smug gratitude of a man who had never fed a cat at 6 in the morning. "Traitor," Agatha muttered at Hodge. The village, alerted at dawn by Doris Simpson's spectacularly inaccurate recounting of events, had already begun rewriting the entire ordeal. By breakfast, Carsley had firmly decided James had been kidnapped by a secret ring of wartime treasure hunters. By 11's, Mrs. Timms was telling people James had been rescued by Agatha single-handedly wrestling an armed fugitive into submission behind the Red Lion. Agatha privately approved of that version, but only in the most modest and dignified way. Bill arrived mid-morning with forms, apologies, and a tin of shortbread offered as emotional compensation. "You did brilliantly, Agatha," he said. "We're all grateful." "Well, someone had to act," Agatha replied, aiming for breezy indifference but landing closer to gratified preening. James cleared his throat. "Bill is exaggerating." Bill shot Agatha a sympathetic look. "I'm not. Mrs. Blocksby visited next, carrying a pot of chamomile tea that made Agatha want to faint from boredom. "The important thing," she said gently, "is that we are all safe." "Yes, well," Agatha began, ready to deliver a speech involving courage, intuition, and the unreliability of certain historians, but Mrs. Blocksby placed a warm hand over hers. "You were brave," she said simply, "and kind. Don't brush it away." Agatha's throat tightened inconveniently. "Oh, honestly, it wasn't. I simply did what any responsible, sensible—" "Agatha," Mrs. Blocksby said softly, "take the compliment." Agatha nodded once, briskly, as if accepting an award at a corporate luncheon. Charles swept in just as Mrs. Blocksby departed, wearing an expression of heroic self-sacrifice. "Well, darling, I assume the village has already erected statues of us?" "Of me?" Agatha corrected. Charles adopted a wounded sigh. "I drove you, rescued you from thickets, stopped you attacking civilians. You hid behind me at the phone box," Agatha reminded. Charles grinned. "A tactical decision." Before Agatha could retort, the WI arrived at full strength, bearing casseroles and recommendations for seminars on recognizing suspicious historians. Mrs. Timms insisted that Agatha should personally lead the seminar since she had extensive experience with dangerous types, including former husbands. Agatha felt this was unnecessary commentary. By afternoon, James had regained some colour and even attempted sitting up without looking theatrically fragile. He caught Agatha's gaze and smiled. "Thank you," he said quietly when the others were gone. "You truly helped save me." Agatha sniffed. "Well, someone had to. You're hopeless at staying out of trouble." James chuckled. "Agatha, you really shouldn't have worried. I was never in any—" She shot to her feet. "If you finish that sentence, I will throw your teapot through the window." James blinked. "Danger," he whispered meekly. "Exactly," she huffed. "Men vanish for days, leave their wallets lying about like clues from a school play, get kidnapped by deranged academics, and somehow I'm the one who mustn't fuss." Hodge meowed as if backing her argument. James looked sheepish. "All right, I concede. You had every right to worry." "I didn't worry," Agatha said instantly, arms crossed. "I was just curious." "Very," James murmured. Agatha's cheeks warmed. "Oh, do shut up."